Welcome to the video about making coasters. Step 1. Gather your materials. Fun fabric of your choice. Felt for the interior. Jewels, optional for a finished product. Cutting materials. And edges, also optional. Step 2. Cut the outside and inside materials into squares. A comfortable coaster size is 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters or 4 inches by 4 inches. Here I'm cutting the inside material, the felt, by using a cutting board. With a thinner outside material, I recommend cutting 2 inside felt pieces. You can trim the edges so that the corners on the coaster are less clumpy. Next, take your fabric and iron it if necessary. Time to cut the fabric. Take the fabric and cut it into the size that you desire. By the end, you should have your 2 perfect squares, and the inside felt should fit perfectly and even be a little smaller. Then I recommend taking pins and pinning the insides together so it's inside out. The following is a demonstration of how to cut your fabric using a cutout, which is sometimes easier depending on your fabric or tools. Also cutting the felt squares roughly by using the cutout. Now it's time to sew. Here I'm going to zigzag sew the edges to prevent fraying during the process. You might want to do this or not depending on your fabric. The edges have now been zigzag sewn. Now take the inside felt pieces and I zigzag sew them to the outside material. Make sure you sew them on the inside part of the outside material. As now you can see, I have zigzag sewed the felt to the inside part of one of the fabric pieces. If you want to sew an edge on your coaster, we're going to sew it to the outside of the other coaster piece. So line up the trim on the outside side of the fabric piece and sew with the dangly part aiming towards the inside, or the part that you want showing. The trim I'm using today has a lot of dangly parts, which makes this sewing more time consuming, a bit more difficult. However, using a trim with less dangly parts would make this sewing a lot more straightforward. And now the final result with the trim on the outside side of the coaster piece and the other side of the coaster with the felt. Now take the 2 pieces and stick them together inside out, so that would be the dangly part with the trim on the inside and the outside sides on the outside. And now to sew the pieces together, it might be easier to pin them together. So what we're going to do first is we're going to zigzag sew. I zigzag sew them first and only zigzag sew 3 edges. Leave the 4th one open. is what it looks like with 3 edges zigzag sewn, with the felt on the outside and the dangly part, the trim on the inside. So now I'm gonna straight sew the 3 edges, and I actually follow the stitch from when I sewed the trim on so that the edges are relatively straight on the 3 sides. Here's the final result with the edges sewn together, the 2 pieces of the coaster. And now, of course, it's time to turn the coaster inside out. If needed, you might need to put something pointy in there to push out the edges as far as they go. And then I take off iron and iron it flat so that the final sewing is much easier and it's much more flat coaster. So take the 4th edge that was unsewn with the trim and fold it in and then iron it so that the final sewing of the 4th edge will be much easier. And fold it in so that it sews nicely together, and I sew a straight edge very close to the edge. As you can see, this may take a while and a lot of perfecting to get the edge perfectly tucked in. Then keep sewing the straight stitch along the whole border around the edges so that it's close to the edge like this. Next, sew another straight stitch about 1/2 centimeter to the inside so that you have 2 parallel stitches around the edges. Next, what I like to do is sew 2 diagonal lines directly through the coaster so that it gives it a nice finishing touch. And there you have it, your final coaster. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and you found it helpful. I hope your sewing went well today. Thank you.